Donald Trump is back in headlines for an Easter Sunday message that mixed profanity, military threats, and an unusual religious sign-off into one of the most striking posts of his current presidency. The biggest verified question is not whether the post was provocative. That is obvious from the language itself. The real question is what it signals about the next phase of the Iran crisis. Because the post came with a public deadline, a threatened next target list, and a promised White House appearance the very next day. For more celebrity and public figure updates, like, subscribe, and share to support Starline Daily for more trending news and documentary-style breakdowns. On April 5, 2026, Trump posted on Truth Social that Tuesday would be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day for Iran if the Strait of Hormuz was not reopened, and he ended the Easter morning message with the phrase, "Praise be to Allah." Public reporting also notes that Trump has previously described himself as a non-denominational Christian, which is part of why that closing line immediately drew so much attention online and in the press. What makes the post more than just another viral Trump moment is the timeline around it. One day earlier, on Saturday, April 4th, Trump used Truth Social to remind Iran that he had already given the country 10 days to make a deal or reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and he warned that there were 48 hours left before, in his words, all hell would come down. Axios reported that the 10-day deadline was expected to expire on Monday, April 6, 2026, and that indirect negotiations had been underway through regional mediators, but that no major breakthrough had been publicly reported. So by the time the Easter post appeared, it was not an isolated message. It was the sharper, more explicit continuation of a pressure campaign that had already been unfolding in public and that now appeared to be moving toward a specific next step if Iran did not change course. That is the key context viewers need, because without it, the Easter post can look like random provocation when it was actually tied to a deadline Trump himself had already set. The broader backdrop is the war that public reporting says began on February 28th, with U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran, a conflict that has pushed oil markets, diplomacy, and military messaging into a much more dangerous place. Reuters reported on April 5th that the Strait of Hormuz had been effectively closed by Tehran since those attacks began more than a month earlier, making the waterway central not just to the military confrontation, but to the global economy. People and other reports tied the latest escalation to mounting international pressure to end the conflict as oil prices rose and uncertainty spread. That helps explain why Trump's message focused so specifically on the strait and why he linked its reopening to threatened attacks on Iranian infrastructure. It also explains why the language landed so hard on Easter Sunday. The message was not only about rhetoric or symbolism, but about whether the administration was preparing the public for another round of strikes. This is also why Trump's April 1st address matters so much in the timeline. In that national address, he said the war was nearing completion and argued that Iran's Navy, Air Force, and missile capacity had been heavily degraded. Public reporting said he framed the military campaign as part of the effort to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, while also suggesting that regime change, though not the stated original goal, could produce a government he described as less radical and more reasonable. The White House separately said on April 1st that the objectives of Operation Epic Fury were to destroy Iran's missile capabilities, eliminate its naval threat, sever support for terrorist proxies, and ensure Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. Put together, those statements matter because they show how the administration is publicly defining the conflict, not as a limited one-off strike, but as a larger campaign with military, political, and strategic goals. That makes the Easter post feel less like an outburst and more like a signal flare inside an already active operation. Then there is the other major piece of the story, the timing of Trump's planned Monday appearance. Reuters reported that in a separate message on April 5th, Trump said he would hold a news conference on Monday, April 6th, in the Oval Office after the U.S. military rescued two American pilots whose aircraft had been downed in Iran. The Associated Press and Reuters both reported that the recovery of the second crew member was a major mission conducted deep inside Iranian territory, adding even more intensity to the moment. That matters for this story because it means the Easter post did not land in a vacuum. It landed just as the administration was also highlighting a dramatic rescue operation, a military success story that could help frame whatever Trump planned to say next about Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, and whether his deadline would actually be enforced. In other words, the Monday press conference was positioned not just as a rescue update, but as the next public stage in a larger escalation narrative. The phrase that drew the most attention, of course, was not only the profanity, but the ending, "Praise be to Allah." That wording stood out because it came at the end of a threat aimed at Iran on Easter Sunday, one of the holiest days on the Christian calendar. The verified fact here is simple. Trump used that phrase in the post. What has not been publicly confirmed is why he chose it, whether he intended it as sarcasm, mockery, emphasis, or something else, and whether the White House planned any further explanation. So the safest and most accurate way to cover that line is to treat it as a notable fact, not a window into motive. That is especially important in a story like this, where viewers may rush to read intention into symbolism. The stronger documentary approach is to say exactly what was posted, show where it fits in the timeline, and separate the known from the unknown. There is another reason this post matters politically and culturally. It shows how Trump continues to turn policy, crisis management, and media spectacle into one shared public performance. The deadline was not buried in a briefing memo. It was announced on social media. The threat was not limited to formal diplomatic language. It was delivered in a profane Easter message that instantly generated headlines. And the next update was not left vague. Trump publicly said he would appear the next day in the Oval Office. Whether supporters view that as direct leadership or critics view it as dangerous escalation, the sequence is the same. Public post, rising reaction, renewed deadline, then a promised on-camera event. That is part of why this story spread so quickly beyond politics pages and into broader culture coverage. The post was not just newsworthy because of Iran. It was newsworthy because it was instantly recognizable as Trump using shock, timing, and attention control to dominate the conversation. As of Sunday, April 5th, 2026, the clearest confirmed update is this. Trump publicly threatened Iranian infrastructure in an Easter morning Truth Social post, tied that threat to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, repeated the escalation after a prior April 4th ultimatum, and said he would hold a Monday, April 6th press conference after the rescue of 2 U.S. pilots in Iran. The biggest unresolved point is still the same one public reporting has been flagging for days: what exact terms Trump would accept as a deal, and whether the deadline would actually produce diplomacy, another delay, or new strikes. That part has not been publicly confirmed yet. Thanks for watching Starline Daily.